That could play a part into diet and genetics to some degree. It could be that you have low thyroid function. It could be that you have gut dysbiosis and leaky gut and gut permeability. It could be you have over toxicity. You're struggling with hormone production. It could be that you have recently been sick because cholesterol play has immune function support. So if we're sick, that could increase our cholesterol levels. Women, which is probably a big population for you and your following, is that if a woman is on her cycle and currently menstruating, her cholesterol can go up because it's a repair cycle.
Wow.
So yeah. So, but is the doctor, when you go in and you have high cholesterol, has a doctor ever asked any woman, hey, are you menstruating? When you got that? No doctor is
Finally
asking that.
got that.
I had someone come to me and we were digging forever. We couldn't figure out why. All of a sudden we've had multiple in-depth the NMR panels and they were good. And all of a sudden we had a huge spike and we were trying to figure out why. He got a tattoo the week before. Tattoos are covered with heavy metals and toxicity issues that drastically spiked his cholesterol. Do you think any doctor is saying, hey, that's a nice tattoo. Did you happen to get that just before these labs? No. We're
Wow.
looking at single labs instead of a pattern and stepping back and say, hey, your cholesterol was fine. This whatever marker was fine. All of a sudden it's not. What caused that? It's okay, it's elevated. Here's a drug to lower that or to raise that or whatever it is we're trying to do. We're just trying to modulate that. When in reality, we don't have a health problem because we are deficient in a pharmaceutical.
Mm.
One of the only pure examples of that are sometimes hormones. They can be helpful. Primarily, type 1 diabetics, right? Like they really will have to take insulin for the
Yeah.
rest of their life. Hormone issues and imbalances, we can actually address through other means. Using hormones in place while we're working, that can be helpful because sometimes we need, and again, I'm really, when I say that, I'm always referring to bioidentical hormones for synthetic, but sometimes that can be helpful. Women, it's really interesting. If you look at women, they have much lower risk coming back to heart disease, much lower risk of heart disease under the age of 50, pre-menopause,
Mm.
than men do. This is higher because estrogen is cardiovascular protective,
Wow.
and they have much lower amounts of estrogen post-menopause, and many of them have too little estrogen. And that's why they continue to struggle with so many issues from weight. Because again, we want to go back to obesity and fat function in our health, specifically in women. Your fat cells actually secrete estrogen. So when women go through menopause, it's why weight loss can be so difficult because their ovaries have stopped the production of estrogen, and they're using their fat cells to try and keep those levels up. That's why no matter what they do, how little they eat, no matter what diet they try, they're not addressing it, because what we should be addressing, and no one talks about, is the adrenal function in menopausal and postmenopausal women, because it's the adrenals who should primarily be making the estrogen at that point. But no one's addressing that as how to help women through. That's why so many herbals help, because they're helping with stress reduction. They're sometimes helping with the signaling coming from the brain to the different glands on how to produce these things. And it's that hormone signaling that's creating all these symptoms. So it's really, we're totally missing the goal of how to help menopausal women. We're going through that transition or post, and that we really need to be focusing on the adrenals as the primary target, because they're the ones who really should be helping with that. And again, taking bioidentical hormones can help with that in the short term, but the goal should be that we get the body to where it really doesn't need that anymore. But again, even hormones tie into cardiovascular health, and so much of that is being missed as well.
Yeah, so for things that are being missed, let's can we talk triglycerides for a second and the role of like blood sugar and diabetes in heart disease?
Yeah, so this is another big thing that doesn't get talked about. If you look at some of the pioneers in functional medicine, and really from a cardiovascular standpoint, and where they focused on, what they were seeing is that if you have heart disease, you have diabetes. If you have diabetes, you have heart disease. They're the same disease manifesting in a different way. Another way we can look at, another great example of that, is autoimmunity. Autoimmunity is the same way. Autoimmunity, part of how it expresses itself, because it's all really coming from the same base factors, whether you have Hashimoto's or celiac or lupus or MS, they're really coming from the same base. What happens is, let's say you have celiac and I have Hashimoto's, it's probably because I have the genetic factor for Hashimoto's and you have the genetic factor for celiac.
Mm.
That's why you got that and I got mine. That's really what differentiates. Otherwise, the core factors that we address all autoimmunity primarily the same way. It's really the same pathway with little nuances for each one, but primarily through the same pathway. Because they really have those same functions. It's the genetics, which we can't change. We can work on their expression, which is the diet and lifestyle, and addressing those toxicity issues that have led to that. So diabetes and heart disease are somewhat the same way, or what exhibits itself first. And much of that comes back to insulin resistance. A great person to research on this is Dr. Robert Kraft. Is it Robert Kraft? Joseph Kraft. I think it's Dr. Joseph Kraft. If you search Dr. Kraft and insulin, it'll come up, but I believe it's Dr. Joseph Kraft. It's an incredible researcher. He practiced primarily, I believe, in the 70s and 80s with over 14,000 patients in his population that he had this data from. And he found that we are, on average, 10 years late to diagnosing type 2 diabetes because we're looking at it as a blood sugar problem and not understanding that as an insulin problem. And if we look at the scale of insulin resistance and the data, again, he had 14,000 patients in his practice that he was using this data for. He probably had more patients, but that he had data from specifically on glucose response and insulin response. And he would use the normal parameters for glucose, for fasting glucose response, A1C, and then he would use fasting insulin and an insulin-mediated response. So he would give that glucose, that 75 grams of glucose serum, and then test their fasting insulin and then their 1, 2, and 3 hour insulin response. And what he saw was we're missing about 65% of those not diagnosed as 65% of those who are insulin resistant.
Wow.
Were also diabetic, but not being diagnosed yet. 65%.
Wow.
This is why when you look at the estimations of how many are pre-diabetic, if by conventional standards you're pre-diabetic, you're already diabetic. It's just not so far yet because, again, we have to look at it at insulin resistance. And then we make it even worse by when someone gets so diabetic, instead of actually getting rid of the carbohydrates, which are leading to the higher glucose, which demands the higher insulin, we give them more insulin. It's like saying someone who's lactose intolerant, we're giving them we're like, hey, drink 6 glasses of milk every day. That's not we just need to get rid of the milk. If you're insulin resistant, you're carbohydrate intolerant. It's the same, two different terms for the same thing. So we don't have to get rid of all carbohydrates, but we drastically need to lower them so we're not demanding so much. And then we need to work on, there's many different ways that we can improve the insulin sensitivity of the insulin receptor sites. Sometimes this can be specific nutrient deficiencies. Vitamin B1 is a great one. We need vitamin B1 to actually sequester glucose out of the bloodstream. So that can have a big impact. We have 2 kind of seesaw compounds in the body. One's called mTOR, the other one's called AMPK or AMP kinase, and these seesaw with each other. This one basically promotes growth. This one, mTOR, promotes growth. AMPK promotes breakdown. AMPK also signals things that basically bring sugar into the cell and promote insulin sensitivity. They support GLUT1 activation. Or GLUT activation, which is inside the cell and helping this. So that's why metformin, which is a super popular drug, it's an AMPK activator. That's one of its primary ways of its working. And also why metformin is sometimes used, probably one of the safer pharmaceuticals out there, honestly. Still not my first approach, what I wouldn't recommend, but because it's activation of AMPK, and AMPK's limitation on mTOR, which can promote cancer growth and so many other things, why people in the longevity field often take metformin at a low dose to help support that. We can also do other things. There's a lot of natural things. Intermittent fasting promotes AMPK activity. A low carb diet promotes AMPK activity. A product called a nutraceutical a supplement called berberine is a powerful AMPK. Berberine has been shown in multiple studies. In fact, in 14 different studies that looked at berberine compared to metformin in type 2 diabetics. And berberine from from lowering glucose in the blood, basically by activating AMPK, by lowering glucose in the blood, which is what they call an oral hypoglycemic. That's how they classify metformin. They were basically equal in that function. Berberine worked just as well, but berberine had far more improvements in things like our lipids. And metformin doesn't touch your lipids. It might lower your triglycerides a little bit because of glucose's impact on our triglycerides. But it also, berberine lowers your LDL in a positive way, lowers your triglycerides, improves insulin sensitivity. There's one or two studies that actually show it might actually also improve the beta cell functions of the pancreas, which is what produces insulin. So it can improve your gut, it can lower inflammation, it can work on so many different things that metformin doesn't touch. Money is the only example, is the only reason why doctors are not promoting berberine over metformin. It's just not being told because you can't, there's no way to make mass amounts of money from it. There's no reason why the first go-to drug for diabetes and insulin resistance shouldn't be berberine. Berberine is just fantastic. It can, like I said, can work on so many other things. And diabetics also, type 2 diabetics often have what's referred to as metabolic syndrome, which is a collection of 5 different markers, and you have to have at least 3 of them to technically be called having metabolic syndrome. But even having one of them increases your risk drastically because they're all related from the core standpoint. So metabolic syndrome means high blood sugar. It doesn't have to be diabetes, but higher blood sugar, so maybe pre-diabetic, high waist circumference, so looking at obesity, high triglycerides, low HDL, and hypertension, high blood pressure. If you have 3 of those 5, you could be listed as metabolic syndrome. Berberine impacts nearly every single one of those. And they even actually found, which was really cool, that berberine, even when it doesn't change your weight, redistributes your fat. So it removes the fat from the core, from your abdomen, which is the most dangerous fat. That fat around your organs is associated. Right? Yeah, the visceral fat, which is associated with, has the highest association with all sorts of poor outcomes. So it reduced visceral fat even in the absence of weight loss, which is really interesting. And then how that can impact so many different things. So like if I could find one nutraceutical for metabolic syndrome, it's berberine. It just helps with like every single part of it. From a root cause standpoint, it's improving insulin sensitivity, it's improving the AMP kinase activity, it's improving liver function, it reduces inflammation, which just, it's crazy when we look at the root of metabolic syndrome or diabetes or cardiovascular disease, however we want to call it, because it's really all the same disease manifested in different symptoms, is that it's oxidative stress, inflammation, insulin resistance, and nutrient deficiencies. We can really just look at these 4 things. Now, within that, the nutrient deficiencies could be a couple different ones. The oxidative stress and inflammation, like that's a long path. We could go down many different things as to what could be causing that. So it's digging into that and but it's really those 4 main things that play into that. But doctors, we're not looking at, none of the medications address any of those issues.
Okay, so I know, my head. So if you've got somebody who is just kind of coming in and new to this information, where do you start them off? Like what are like the top maybe 2 or 3 things that you would suggest for them to do in order to kind of like maybe stave off, or if they're already into some concerns with their cardiovascular, kind of remedy what's going on there?
Yeah, so regardless of who's coming to me with what problem, my first step is always we need to get a baseline. So we need to get you back to human baseline. And what I mean by that is primarily human nutrition baseline. We talked earlier about, we struggle to realize what a human diet is. And we've gotten so far away from that. And that alone can help fix so many problems. I see so many practitioners of all sorts who may be working in a more holistic. And so the person comes in and they do this evaluation, like, okay, you need to start this dietary approach and start taking these 6 supplements, right? And they just like onboard them with tons of supplements that if they actually just started eating real whole food for a week, wouldn't need half of those supplements. But it's a really good way it's a great business model if you can sell 6 instead of 3. That's not our approach. It's not my approach. So it's let's get you on. I don't want to give you, and it's for 2 things. I want people to believe in the power of food. We have, it is now just this human tendency now that if we take a pill, no matter any other changes we made and something positive happens, it was really the pill that did that all.
Mm.
So if I give you a dietary protocol and I give you a supplement protocol at the same time, you start both of those from scratch, you're primarily going to believe that it was probably the pill that had that benefit, and you're going to rely heavier on that and let your diet slip. But if I
Mm.
say before I give you any supplement recommendations, I want you to just eat real whole food, which how we classify real whole food for a human is meats, eggs, shellfish, seafood, nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, leafy greens. I think I said nuts and seeds. Yeah.
Yes.
These are real whole foods. That's what your diet should look like for 4 weeks. If you can eat those for 4 weeks, you'll be amazed at how many positive changes you can get in those 4 weeks. Then we can start looking at what is dysfunction outside of just those inflammatory non-human foods that were causing problems. So many of those problems are just an inflammatory response to things you should have never been eating. So we
Mm.
don't even need to supplement that problem. It was just a reaction to those foods you shouldn't have been eating. So we start with real whole food, get to there. Then we can start getting this baseline and we start evaluating what problems are there and how to address it, looking at a collection of symptoms to come together. Okay, it's not just this symptom, but also paired with these 5 other symptoms. Now we know that's probably pointing to this. Or maybe we do some basic lab works and start with some basic foundational lab work to pair with that along with your symptoms and your history. Now, when we bring this more information, we can really see. Now it's even, just like I said with studies, if we use 10,000 people versus 5, we're going to have a much
Sure.
better indicator like, yes, that is the problem. So if we have your symptoms plus your history plus lab work all coming together, we can see, yes, this is a really strong indicator. It's this problem. So we can start attacking that. So it's really just starting on that diet. If with diabetes and heart disease, again, we know the primary driver is insulin resistance.
Mm-hmm.
There might be nutrient deficiencies. There might be inflammation and oxidative stress. The problem is insulin resistance will cause all of those. We cannot address the other deeper causes until we get insulin resistance under control. So the primary focus when you're dealing with any of that metabolic syndrome, the hypertension, the high blood sugar, the poor lipids, any of those, the poor cholesterol, any of those, the obesity, we know that insulin resistance is the driving factor, which means we have to handle that head on the best way we see in research over and over and over. Again, if we're insulin resistant, we're carbohydrate intolerant. So we
Yeah.
need to lower the carbohydrates. Depending on the severity, that might be going all the way to a ketogenic diet, which is really restrictive, which is basically out of those categories, we get rid of the starches, we get rid of root vegetables and potatoes and tubers, and we cut out the fruits besides like berries. And if we want to get traditional, technically avocados and olives are fruits,
Right.
but they're from a nutritional standpoint, we might as well consider them vegetables. So, we keep those things. So it's leafy green, non-starchy vegetables, nuts and seeds, maybe some berries, meats, eggs, nuts, shellfish, seafood, things like that. And that's our focus. We're a whole food, nutrient dense ketogenic diet. Our company calls it NDK, nutrient dense keto.
Mm.
We're focusing on getting things like organ meats, like shellfish and cold water fatty fish to promote the nutrients that your body needs to help with those, as well as focusing again, low anti-inflammatory diet to deeper address. Some people may not be that insulin resistant and might be able to just eat real whole food and reverse that issue. Or they just want to do it slower. You'll get there, it's just going to be slower. Some people want it really fast. And so going on a ketogenic diet will often address that quicker. And then after that, some new symptoms sometimes pop up because now we're changing how we eat. And what I tell people is, a great example, they all of a sudden get these massive digestive issues when they go keto sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because their body hasn't needed to digest fat. Maybe they've been eating low fat for so long, and they definitely haven't been eating high fat to the degree of keto, that their body is just really bad at digesting fats. Keto didn't cause that, but it really enlightened you to it. It's because there's 1,000 different ways to do a keto diet, and many people do a really poor one, or it might not be right for them, or it highlighted this problem like I talked about. When we address that, it goes away and the body performs amazingly. I've had people from every female hormonal issue you can think of, to autoimmunity, to digestive issues, to metabolics, all of them, thyroid issues, adrenal issues, improve on a ketogenic diet. I don't believe it's required for everyone,
Right.
but I think it could benefit everyone if done properly. I don't eat a ketogenic diet all the time, so it's not something I promote, but I do promote a ketogenic diet, but not to the extent that I think it's the human diet that everyone needs, but I do think everyone could benefit from it when we're looking at chronic, because again,
So for people that are, they have trouble, they're so used to burning glucose as their main source of fuel, they have trouble, converting over to
mhm.
the fat burning or that metabolic flexibility. How do you walk somebody through the transition?
Yeah, so there's two ways. There's the cold turkey dive all in. I'm not a fan.
Me
I think
neither.
it's really shocking on the body, and that's when we're really likely to get a lot of those really frustrating symptoms.
Yeah.
Um, the a really good book and just resource that walks through this is Mark Sisson from Primal Blueprint has the Keto Reset book. Basically, puts you on a paleo diet for 3 weeks. He actually has a test, a questionnaire in the book that you're supposed to go, and I think you have to get at least like 70% on that quiz. And if you score 70% or higher, then it's like, okay, you have the green light to go keto. You've addressed some of those fueling issues that you can transition to keto easily. If not, then you need to stay basically on that paleo diet and slowly continue to lower. And that basically, if you're coming from a standard American diet, which is on average 300 grams of carbohydrates a day, the
Yeah,
recommendation of a baseline paleo where you might have some potatoes and fruit is probably going to be somewhere between 75 and 150 grams. That's still a drastic cut.
it is.
That's huge. It's 2/3 to a half of your carbohydrates, which is still a big shift. And so allowing your body that, and then from there going down to 50 or less of grams of carbohydrates. And so it's this process of weaning that. So we, I talk about, just remove grains and added sugars from your diet. Start there. The big added sugars. Get rid of sodas and fruit juices
Oh
and
yeah.
things like that, these added sugars, and get rid of grains. Start there. Then, we slowly, and we start focusing, and then we can look at lowering, getting rid of high carbohydrate fruits, high glycemic fruits, getting rid of those the next week. And then we look at lowering potatoes, because those are the highest starch. And then, you're only eating beets and carrots, which are moderate. But then we finally remove those. So it might be this month-long process of getting there. And people avoid so many more, they have so few less symptoms associated with going keto when they do it this way. It's just easier on the body. Some people are they're like, I just want to blast my way through. If they do, they're definitely, we've put together certain supplement protocols that I think really help with that, because I know that, like, you're probably going to struggle with digestive issues because your body's like, holy cow, that is a lot of fat we've never seen. And so
Hmm.
we support that certain ways. We want to maybe support electrolytes and just general liver support and electrolytes to help with energy, that, brain fog and headaches and fatigue are often associated with a lessening of electrolytes, because we don't just, everyone says, oh, your body's 70% water or whatever percent that is, 60% or whatever that number is. But in reality, it's not. We never have just water in our body. Water is always contains an electrolyte solution. And so anytime we lose water, we lose electrolytes. What a lot of people don't realize is it's a three-step process. So when we cut our carbohydrates drastically, we then start burning through the stored glucose that we have, which can be about 2,000 calories worth of glucose we can store in our liver and muscles. That's about all we can store. So we start burning through that, and every molecule of glucose, or really glycogen, in those cells contains water. And all that water contains electrolytes. So as we burn through the glucose, we eliminate lots of water. That's why people go on a ketogenic diet, and if they do that, and it's like 10 pounds in the first week, they realistically didn't lose 10 pounds of fat. A
Sure.
lot of that was water and inflammation. That's a good thing that we're getting rid of that. That's excess weight, inflammation, and bloat you were carrying around. So I don't like to discount that, but we have to understand, with all that water meant we lost a lot of electrolytes. So our body is struggling to rebalance. We often need to really increase how much we're getting in, which is also helpful of getting in lots of vegetables and leafy greens in the beginning to get those minerals, but often supplementing with that can be really helpful. So there's so many things that, I don't think it's a right and wrong way. I have my preference, but if you're going to do it the hardcore, go all in, there are definitely some precautions to know about, and I think supplementing there can be really helpful to kind of help with that transition.
Awesome. So you have a keto course, don't you?
Yeah, so we have we're big. So I work with my dad's company, Destination Health. We focus primarily on truck drivers, and our goal is education. We want to give education more and more and more. So we do that primarily through courses. I also do Facebook Lives, and we have several different ways of giving out education. The most in depth is through our courses. So we have a keto jumpstart. That's kind of let's understand the basics and foundations of why a ketogenic diet works, how it works, what it's doing, and how to go about it. We talk about nutrient density. We talk about other tools that if you want to bring in fasting of different sorts, how and when you might do that and who it's right for, because it's not right for everyone, and
Right.
what that looks like and how to know. So we kind of have a basic kind of get into it keto course. And we have two other ones, metabolic syndrome, as you know, we spent a lot of time talking all those different markers. And then also a digestive course, which is a big passion for me, because that was my backstory of lots of digestive issues. Being that if I wasn't near, if I couldn't get to a bathroom quickly, it was a problem for me. It got so severe before I found the NTA, and started working through all this. Now I can go on overnight backpacking trips and be totally fine. So I've come a very long way. So it's a big passion for me. So we go through that. But yeah, so we're loving those, and we're actually getting ready to, I don't know when specifically this will air, but if it's prior to the new year, or very soon, around that time in that first week or so, we'll be launching. We do standalone courses. So we have a really cheap option, $30 to $50 for this. If you just want to take the course, it's a
Wow.
self-paced walkthrough. You can see that material and kind of go through it yourself. There's lots of videos and PDF handouts and audio and all sorts of text and information in there. Or what we offer, which is really the supreme package, is our live course, where I present every single week. So the keto course and the digestive courses are 9 weeks. So we will break that whole course down into 9 weeks of topics. And each week we have a webinar that we record and upload into the course. So if you miss it, you can watch it later. You can always go back and watch it again. We have lots of ways of submitting questions because we have a Q&A with each webinar. So even if you don't make it, you can submit questions inside the course for me to answer during that Q&A as well. So those launch the first full week of January, which is like, I think the 8th and 10th, if I believe. It's on Tuesdays and Thursdays that we do those courses. Digestive is on Tuesday, and then metabolic syndrome and keto are on Thursdays. But again, even if you never make those times, it's still advantage to do the live course, which I believe, I can't remember, we've been changing those prices. We might be doing specials for New Year's resolutions, which I think is an incredible deal. It's $99, which is just ridiculous, because you get basically 8 to 9 hours, depending on the metabolic syndrome is 8 weeks, the other two are 9. 8 to 9 hours, even some of them I now keep going longer and longer because I find more and more things to talk about. So sometimes they're an hour to an hour and a half usually. So you might have at minimum 9 hours basically of webinar time and an opportunity to ask questions every single week with me, for $100 is ridiculous.
Fantastic
So
price.
yeah, so being able to jump on that. New Year's resolutions, you're going to be meeting, with a group of people every week, to help keep you accountable as you talk about this. And then we talk at each of those how to, what transition looks like if you need to stay on that certain pathway that we've been working on, what that transition is. Just our goal always is kind of, end goal is getting more to like a paleo diet. That's kind of the base human diet to some extent. And so our goal is that we get to that point that we don't need these deeper therapeutic diets anymore, that we can really broaden, which is where my diet consists of now. It's more broad. Some days I'm 0 carbs. I just ate meat all day. And then other days I have 150 grams of carbohydrates because I had some coconut milk ice cream and a sweet potato. And so my sugars weren't, they were much higher. But on average, I probably consume around 50 to 75. So I'm definitely lower carb. And that's what works for me. So we talk about how to find what works for you and what that looks like.
That's excellent. I'm glad that your course launches when it does, because I think if my scheduling is correct, we're on track for your episode to come out on I think it's New Year's Day. So
Awesome.
that'll work out.
Yeah.
Where can people find you guys?
Yeah, so our Facebook group is the easiest, simply because that is health focused. As I said, our website is letstruck.com. You can find all of our courses at learn.letstruck.com. Once we allow signups for the first week after start. So if we start on, let's say, Tuesday, January 8th. I think that date's correct. Don't quote me on it. But
Sure.
around that time, we start on January 8th. On a Tuesday, you really have until the following Tuesday to get signed up, because that
Right.
first week of the webinar is basically just a, hey, welcome overview. This is what you're going to learn. So we still allow you that opportunity to get in, which is really nice. So you've got basically the first 2 weeks of January to sign up for our
Okay.
courses, which makes that really nice. Our Facebook group, if you just search Destination Health, is going to be the easiest way. You can find our group, which is Destination Health Tribe. That's our private Facebook group. We've got about 22,000 people in there, so we will pop up as your main, the main answer when you do that search function. And you also see Destination Health with Kevin Rutherford, who's my dad, the owner of the company, and that's our public Facebook page. You can find a lot of shareable things on there.
Awesome. I super appreciate you taking time to do this. I know that sometimes your schedule gets nuts when you have lots of things going on, and you're a fantastic and very active member of the NTP community. I've always just appreciated your posts. Your stuff is always so informative. So
Yeah,
thanks.
I love being here and just sharing with you guys.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for taking the time.